Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive actions. Today's guest is Jacqueline Wales. Jacqueline is an astute observer of behavior, endlessly fascinated by the messiness of being human, and she finds people who are vulnerable and honest about their struggles incredibly interesting and courageous. Jacqueline grew up in the school of hard knocks and witnessed firsthand many of the conditions that sabotage a person's ability to succeed. This experience helped her enormously. While observing and talking with thousands of people over several decades, Jacqueline has come to understand the challenges we all confront are no more different than no matter who you are and what you're doing in life. Jacqueline is the author of When the Crow Sings, Fearless Factor, and the soon to be published The Fearless Factor at Work. So please welcome to the show, Jacqueline Wales. Jacqueline, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
It's great to be here, Bob. Thank you for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
So do I. And it's interesting because I always think, and I talk about this myself, the idea of fear is something that a lot will hold people back a lot. And I appreciate the books you've written about, fear and overcoming that. So if we could, why don't we start out and tell people, what brought you to where you are today? How did you get to where you are?
A long story. Do we have all afternoon? So if we look at where I'm at today, having published 3 books and I'm running my own coaching facilitation business, developing online programs and so forth, it's all focused on one thing, which is based on personal experience of understanding how fear keeps us in limitation, how our limited self-beliefs, our negative thinking, and our inability to ask for what we want keeps us playing small. And I did that for many, many years. And whilst my life has been extraordinary on so many levels, the interior dialogue of my life was a completely different story from what you were seeing on the surface of things.
Right.
And so what I bring to my work, which has now been 17 years in the process, is the ability to not only relate to my clients and the people around me with the experiences that I've had, but the understanding of what the mindset and behavior does that keeps us from achieving the full potential of who we are. My first book, The Fearless Factor, said, becoming your best self now, which is kind of cliched, Oprah's been done using it to death and so forth. But the thing of this is that everybody wants to be a better version of who they are.
Right.
I don't care who you are. And so we need, to your point, encouragement on how to do that. So by sharing my experiences, by being able to take all of what I've accomplished in my decades of existence and transforming that into something that really is of service to people, that's really where I'm at this point in my life.
And it's such a good idea because I think it tells people a lot of things is one, that we all go through things, and 2, you've experienced, and that experience says, hey, I've done it, maybe you're experiencing it, you have stories, you have, a plateau that you can put people on a level playing field and say, we're all going through these things. We all think these, like you said, you talk about what the mind does when your fear and so forth. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that, because I always find that interesting is when we're fearful of something or scared, it really limits us. And, tell us more about that if you would.
So I have a fundamental philosophy, which is that being fearless is not the absence of fear, but it's the courage to take that next step.
Right.
And, when you take that next step, it leads to more fulfillment, satisfaction, happiness, joy, all the good things in life. And I'm definitely witness to that fact. So when we think about fear, primarily, for most people, it's imagination based. Mm-hmm. It's an emotion. It's a response to some kind of threat, whether it is mental or whether it's physical. And for the most part, the kind of people we talk to on a daily basis, it's a mental construct. It's not a physical thing. I grew up in poverty, and I grew up with violence, and I grew up with all kinds of emotional abuses. And so I understood the fundamentals of that was poverty, drug and alcohol addictions, financial instability. All of these are really real fears for a lot of people. But our minds are what drives this emotion. You know, it's the thought that leads to whatever it is. And many times fear is future based. It's not about the present. It's about what will happen going down the road. And so if you want to build the worst case scenario, go ahead. It's a story, you know. And so the stories that we tell ourselves become the narrative of how we create our lives. And that is a really critical piece to consider. So, you know, tagline for me is always be fearless, see where it gets you, because that means you got to take more risks.
Right.
And when I talk about risk in my books, I talk about my acronym for risk, which is to respect your intention and show courage. Now, yeah, it's courage with a K, but, you know, would you prefer courage or chaos?
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, there's something to be said about this. So taking more rest, respecting your intentions and showing courage is about being willing to fail. And I find that too many times the biggest piece for people and the fear that holds them back the most is the fear of failure. Mm-hmm. Now, what is failure? Failure is a choice, an expectation, a decision that didn't go the way you wanted it to.
Right.
Period.
Right.
So make another choice.
It's a temporary thing.
Yeah, it's a temporary thing. And I like to say we're failing our way to success.
Yeah.
And if you think about that and you add up your columns of failures and successes, your successes are going to be much longer than your failures column. So, you know, when you get into that fear of failure piece, there's another reason why you won't take the next step. Oh, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if that's going to work or not. You know, well, unless you try, you will never know.
Right.
So, you know, the biggest failure being, of course, the failure to try. And that's where I get on my soapbox, you know, because I've always been someone who pushed the envelope. You know, you got to get out there and you got to take a chance.
Well, and especially anymore today, I mean, nobody's going to hand you anything. And that's what I talk to a lot of young people. And, you know, you got to get off the Xbox and the GameCube and whatever else and get out there and make a difference. I don't care if it's pushing a broom, digging a garden for somebody. You know, if you're good at gaming and you can teach people that, show them, have a skill that you can build on and go after that. It's interesting you say that, yeah, we got to take that next step. It doesn't mean go out and be, you know, a base jumper, you know. If you fail at that, you're not coming back usually, but, you know, respecting your risks is a good thing. And knowing that, you know, it's going to take time to learn. Sometimes it is one step at a time. It's, you know, it starts that way. It's not 20. We didn't wake up and start running a marathon when we were born. So we're not going to learn things that quickly. And I think it's a great idea to be able to remember that mentality, even if you have to say that, I think on a daily basis, is, you know, one step at a time, one step at a time. Be the first one out there, respecting your risks and take that risk. Great ideas. And, you know,
so here's the other thing about taking the next step, and I say this to people all the time, is when you thinking about taking that next step, and you just mentioned it, you're not going to run a marathon immediately, but it's not the whole staircase in one go.
No,
it's the next step. And I used to do a lot of hiking when I was younger. And I would climb some pretty good sized mountains around the United States and in Canada, in the Rockies. And it really was about one step at a time. And if you've done any serious hiking up hills, you know that you're really just focusing on your steps and your breath. Right. It's the next step and the next step and the next step until finally you're at the top of the mountain and you're going, wow, this was so worth the effort to get here. Right. Because the realization is you've got a view that very few people get because they're not willing to take the next step.
Right. Wow.
They turn around and they back down the hill.
Yeah. It's a good analogy. That's a great analogy. And as people prepare for vacations, you know, look at that scenario, you know, take that next step. You don't know the immense beauty and awe-inspiring view you're going to see when you're taking those steps. So great analogy. You talk about fear influencing success. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's interesting. So many people want to succeed. And then I think it dives into what you just said there. Well, they build that story. Well, what if this? Don't woulda, coulda, shoulda, or what if yourself to death. Go after, try, ask that question. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's interesting how you weave this into the workplace with your, and that's a good place.
So here's the thing, that failure and success are two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
There are as many people afraid of success as they are of failure. And what is success? Success means that I have to claim ownership of my talents. I have to take ownership of who I am and what I'm capable of. Wow. And if we're being totally and radically honest with ourselves, you have to take ownership of all your bullshit too.
Yeah.
And we all have it. And I don't care who you are, but there's the stuff that runs around your head. So the fear of success is tied into my life will change. Well, yeah. But here's the other thing about this. What's your definition of success?
Right.
It's not about things. It's not about how much money's in the bank, or what kind of car you're driving, or what kind of house you live in, or who you're hanging out with, though it does have some influence who you're hanging out with. But the point being is, it's not the tangible things for me that really create success. Am I a successful human being? Absolutely. When I consider where I came from to where I am today, no question. But there were times in my life when I had massive success on a substantial and tangible level, but I was so locked up in my own internal fears that I didn't appreciate it. Right. So the fear of success was that I hadn't earned it. It was given to me by someone else, i.e. my husband. But I didn't feel I deserved it. And there's another thing about the success thing. Do you deserve to succeed?
Right.
Well, let's get into that one for a moment. How many walk around thinking they don't deserve?
Right.
How many people walk around thinking that I'm not good enough, I'm not capable, I don't have what I need to do in order to get to where I want to go. And that's a really.
And it's that's where people, I think, that piece that holds them back. I think that's aggravating to me personally, because I don't like to be held back. I like to get going. I like to try and go after things. And, even if something breaks around the house, I'm going to try to fix it right away. Even if I don't have all the necessary parts, I'm going to make sure I get everything together and try to fix that as soon as I can, because I don't like to see things broke. It always hasn't been that way, because, I don't know how to do that. I got to call the guy, and maybe they're not there, or maybe they're not available, or I'm not sure who's a good one. Okay. I don't have time to wait for that person usually. Or, maybe you don't have the funds right now. Okay. Then you got to do it yourself, because if you got a hole in your roof, you got to fix that leaf now. It's nature's not going to wait for you. So interesting that you say that, for people to be able to do that. You mentioned self-imposed barriers too. What are some self-imposed barriers that people put up?
Well, I think I've just, you've described them, and I certainly feel like it's the same way. These self-imposed barriers are your self-limiting beliefs. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, I don't think I can do that. I would never do that. That's definitely not for me. Well, who gave you permission to take ownership of that? It's that inner dialogue. There's self-limiting beliefs that are going on. And a big piece of that is simply the fundamental piece of being fearful is I am not good enough.
Right.
I don't care whether you tell me that I'm good enough. If I don't believe that I'm good enough, then it's not gonna help. It's like when people come to me and they say, how can I be more confident?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's back to the one step at a time thing.
Right.
One step forward and two steps back. But each time there's an incremental movement, until one day you wake up and you go, I don't believe that anymore. I don't do that anymore. Wow, I have shifted my mind. I have shifted my behavior. You know, it's like, you know, when you go to the gym, for instance. I'm a CrossFit athlete. So, you know, what's the first thing you want to do? Just make sure you get your shoes on
Right.
before you get out the door. You know, sometimes getting the shoes on can be the hardest part.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
you know, like you don't really want to go to the gym, but well, you get there, and after half an hour of being involved in a routine, you're like, God, I'm so happy I came. You know.
Right.
But if I bought into, well, you know, what's the point? You're too tired. You can't do it. You don't have
It's
what it takes.
raining. Yeah.
It's raining. It's cold. You know. Yeah. There's all kinds of excuses.
Right.
Excusitis.
Yes.
Is what I call it.
Yes.
You suffer from excusitis. And so if you get buy into those excuses, yeah, you might as well just watch television and eat bonbons. Won't get you anywhere.
No, it definitely won't. And what's some ways people might be able to combat the fear of uncertainty? I think that's always that one that's out there that, you know, oh, I'm not sure. And like you said, they build that story. Stop the stories. What's a way you can help people to do that?
Thank you. And my apologies if you're hearing a dog barking in the
That's all right. I like them.
Whenever there's a delivery, the dog goes batshit. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we got a visitor. Oh my God. So here's what I like to say about uncertainty. The quality of your life is determined by how comfortable you can be being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And I'm going to repeat that one.
Yeah, please
The
do.
quality of your life is about how comfortable you can be being uncomfortable. Because change doesn't happen unless you're uncomfortable.
Right.
You know, I mean, we can think about we need to make some changes, but frequently people's backs need to be against the wall before they finally get the message that, yeah, you better make some changes now because it's not going the way you want it to.
Yeah.
So that's a really critical piece about the uncertainty. And I think that life is uncertain. It's the only guarantee we have. Most people seem to think that, you know, we want it all safe. This last year, for instance, has driven everybody into massive fear funnels.
Yeah.
You know, job loss, income loss, life loss, whatever the case may be. The uncertainty has always been there.
Yeah.
This is not new. This is not new, but we got it on a global scale and everybody went, oh my God,
Yeah.
life is falling apart.
Yeah.
You know, it was for real. I mean, I get that. I understand it. But I also say that we all get to choose. We get to choose how we want to respond to things. We get to choose what we want to do with something. We get to choose who you want to become.
Right.
You know, because a lot of people in the last year realized that their priorities were a bit skewed.
Yeah.
They were going after the wrong stuff. And when it came down to basics, what was it about? It was about family and well-being.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting is you look at that over, you know, this journey we call life, and there's no, you know, U-Haul behind a hearse. You can't take this stuff with you. So the like you said, the physical stuff doesn't really matter. And we were told that with the COVID scenario too, is family and well-being went pretty high up on the priority list. You know, maybe people paid off some debt so they didn't have to worry about that income scenario. You know, they had time to reevaluate their goals. And I think it gave people the chance to overcome some of those fears and look intrinsically at themselves and say, why am I scared of that? Or why am I afraid to do that? That person may not be here tomorrow. They started to see a little more of that. That's always been the case, but nobody's guaranteed tomorrow. And this brought it, like you said, more to light so that people understood, hey, we need to take care of some things now. And what are those priorities of those things? Interesting. With the idea of process of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, I love that because, like you said, it's dealing with change, and that change it can be scary. The idea of that, I think, is also it builds strength, because as we build that strength with that change, we're not afraid of it so much anymore. And then we're going to do those steps. We're going to take those actions. We're going to try those things that may be a little bit different for people. How do you show people more of that in a work environment, because the work environment can be conservative. In your new book coming out, Fear at Work, how does that fit in there?
So when I wrote The Fearless Factor at Work, which by the way has already been published, the feeling was I've worked with a lot of mid-level managers.
Okay.
And what was missing for a lot of people, and you touched upon this as for people in the last year, self-reflection. The ability to ask yourself the hard questions.
Right.
You know, people come and say, well, you know, I'm looking for some answers. And I go, well, there's no answers. There's only the right questions and the powerful questions that get you to the answers that you already know you have inside of you, except you haven't been able to nail it yet. So self-reflection is a lot of what the work is all about. Now, in the workplace, people aren't given the opportunity to self-reflect. I mean, I've worked with executives who I go, how much self-reflection do you do? And they go, oh, I've got time for that.
Yeah, I don't have time for it. Yeah.
So, you know, if you don't have time for it, how do you expect to grow and develop? How do you expect to know about the people that you're working with? So when I'm working with mid-level managers, for instance, the first thing I teach them is about self-awareness.
Right.
Because it's really down to the emotional intelligence stuff, which is, you know, self-awareness and social awareness. And I do these 360 behavioral assessments that allows me to really understand what behaviors are driving you, and where do you have too much of one thing and not enough of another, put it that way. So in the workplace particularly, it's really important that people are given the chance to really grow and develop themselves, not their skills, their performance and all the rest of it, but learning how to trust each other, learning how to have conversations that are maybe difficult, but they need to be done, but they can be done in the right way. How to give feedback when feedback is usually tell you everything that's wrong with you and nothing that's right with you, you know. So the psychological safety in the workplace is about allowing people to have a voice, to share ideas, to be able to say, I might be wrong here, but I've got something that might be valid. Because too many times in the workplace is just keep your head down and get the work done.
Right.
Don't complain. And I really don't want to hear about your personal stuff, which is fair enough to some degree. I agree. But at the same time, do you know who you're working with? Do you know what matters to them? Do you know if, you know, where they're finding meaning and purpose in their life, which is another piece of my book. How do you find meaning and purpose in your life? How do you set goals? Are you setting goals? I like to say to my clients who are in the workplace, not what do you want to do in 3 years, but who do you want to be in 3 years? So, you know, I'm working with a top level brand manager who wants to be a senior VP in the marketing department. Well, let's work on some of the things that need to be addressed. And then figure out how to have better relationships with the people that are on your team, your direct reports and so forth. Well, within a 2-year period, or 2.5, nearly 3-year period, he went from being a brand manager to a senior vice president.
Wow.
But it was only because he understood his own forces that were driving him, his own behaviors. He was able to self-reflect. He was able to do some journaling. He was able to look at how he actually interacts with people. More of that is needed in the workplace, and it's sadly lacking.
And it's so true, because it seems like everybody's drinking from a fire hose. Like you said, put your head down, let's get it done. We're on a deadline, we're cost, we got to watch this, we got to meet budget. You know, but we're people first. And when I talk to corporate groups, I remind them, we're people first. It's the people doing the work. Like you said, what is going on in that person's real life? When you're working on a project and it goes, you know, it goes south and you have to work late in midnight, you get into some interesting conversations with people. You get to know them. You're in the trenches fighting this battle of something that went bad, and you're learning about the person. You're having conversations. You're joking around, because if you don't, you're just gonna go crazy. I mean, it's just, you know, one of those things. Yeah, you got to know the people, and that's so important, because it's not just, like you said, at review time. It's not just what you did wrong or did right, but that time to understand who you are and where you want to go is critical. how can people, because this time of year, it's June, we're going to be maybe having mid-year reviews and reviews for employees sometimes. How can they talk more about that to their supervisor or their boss about, those type of things they want to, do and grow with? What's some ways they can do that with their supervisors?
Well, I think, again, remember your boss is just another person.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if you're in a review process, they're going to ask you, so what do you see for yourself in 6 months or a year?
Okay. Hope.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. And we know, unfortunately, the statistics are now, because this is an employee marketplace, that more people are quitting their jobs because they don't want to put up with bad bosses. And we know the old adage of you join a company and leave a boss. This is very true. So when you're in a review process with your boss, you need to set the agenda before you get in there.
Yeah.
You have to be very clear with, I would like to discuss this, not just sit there and listen to what somebody's got to say to you, but be clear about having your own sense of authorship, your own ownership of who you are and what you're doing. And think about the things that are working for you and the things that are not working for you. And if it means that you have to criticize something, you have to couch it in terms of, we've been doing this, but maybe we could think about that.
Right.
Because I think it would be more helpful, blah, blah, blah. Now, people get very defensive when they're faced with, well, you could do better on this. Yeah, okay, well, I'm just going to cross my arms and wait for you to deliver it. And say thank you and leave the room. Okay, but this is an engagement. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. How do you engage in a real conversation? And that is part of go in with a clear idea of the things that you want to get out of this and how you can help, and this is key, help your boss get into that conversation with you. Now that means being proactive. That means that you're giving yourself permission to perhaps enter into a conversation you've never had before. It may be because it's coming up, you can start the conversation early so that you start to become a little bit more friendly in the exchange. So, I mean, that's the kind of generalized view of it, specific to the circumstances. But again, your point, people first. And people right now are getting the upper hand at work. And companies who are not getting with the programs, they're going to see an awful lot of exodus as we go forward.
It's interesting you say that, because I always remember when people, in Toastmasters, they teach you, if you're getting ready for a speech, do it in front of a mirror. That will show your interaction. You'll be able to see that. And that could be something for this type of thing too. So you can go in there and talk intelligently without emotion about the certain things you want to see, and steer that conversation professionally and not emotionally to where you want it to go, because I think that's so cohesive.
That's the key. That's right. That is the key there. It's not an emotional conversation. It's a strategic conversation. And you have to be very clear on what your boundaries are, what you're really looking for in this, because you're in a job, you want to give the best you can give. And frequently you're faced with so many barriers to doing that. And it's either in the form of processes or people. It's these two things that stand up, and it's like the gates go up. And how are you supposed to be your best self at work when you're not given the opportunity to really explore that one? So, again, setting this up is, it's not emotional. And I teach my clients how to communicate on this is asking the questions. So a good manager will start with, I've noticed how well you're doing, as opposed to when you made that big mistake, it cost us blah, blah, blah. So start with the positive. And then if you're the manager listening to this and you're thinking you need to have this conversation, think about what you don't know. Or if something's going wrong, think about how you can say, help me understand. Because you're engaging in a two-way conversation. And when people are asked for help me understand, just that word help, most human beings will go, let me ask you, how can I do that? How can I help you?
Right. And that's I appreciate that idea of help, because yeah, you think of somebody in the water. If they're saying help, they got both hands up and they're accepting of anything you can to help them tread that water. And most people in a work environment want to, like you say, they want to get past all these buoys that pop up, the processes, the people that may not fit it greatly in a group or in a project. They want to get through that so that they can grow as well. So some great points there. Appreciate that. It's interesting. I was reading some more information on one of your websites, and it talks about what are some challenges that companies have engaging and retaining employees. Like you said, it's an employee realm right now, so they've got the upper hand. What are some better ways they can engage those employees so they're not walking out the door?
Well, certainly they should hire better.
It starts there, doesn't it? Yeah.
It starts right there.
Yeah.
And if you don't do your due diligence on people, then you get what you deserve, basically. The second piece of that is you've engaged somebody. Give them the support that they need to be able to do the job right. I've worked with people in companies where there was a job description when they applied for the job, but then they got put on a desk and they have no idea what it is they're supposed to be delivering on.
Right.
None. And nobody seems to be able to tell them either. So my advice to those folks was write your own job description based on what you're doing.
Right.
And then present that to your manager and say, is this what you're looking for?
Good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one piece right there. The second piece of this is a lot of these learning and development programs that they bring in are quick fixes. They're Bandaids. They're not designed to engage people for long-term growth and development.
Right.
But they're not willing to put the money into this. It's like, oh, that's expensive. I hear this all the time in my work. That's very expensive. Well, how many years did you think it took me to get what I got right now so that I can give it to you?
Yeah.
This is
but they want you to give it to them. Yeah. You're not giving it away. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course they want you to, because it's an intangible, they want you to give it away for free.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, you're just talking about mindset and behavior and blah, blah, blah. But my point being is, and this is part of my programming, you take a team of people who are high achievers, if you like, and you bring them together for a long period of time. You do a behavioral study on each of those individuals, and you look at what are the driving behaviors, what can be corrected. And clearly you don't want to correct everything, but you want to grab one or two things.
Right.
You want to build trust. You want to be able to help people communicate more effectively. You got to get them collaborating and sharing ideas, taking ownership of their roles. All of that takes time to build.
Right.
So in my programs, I say it's a minimum of 3 months of engagement with small teams, because there's the other thing. You can put 30 people in a room and give them a training. 30 people in that room, there's maybe 2 or 3 that might walk out of there and use it after the fact.
Right.
But if you get 8 people in a small group and you work with them for 3 to 6 months, they're going to become really tight knit.
Right.
And they are going to be better performers, and they're going to deliver you better results than anything you could hope for. But the short-sightedness of many of these people who are paying for these programs doesn't allow for that very often, unfortunately.
No. Interesting. Very good information. Wow. It's so interesting and so good for this time in our environment where, like you said, employees have the upper hand and people have learned the realities in life that have been put in front of them, and they've readjusted their values, I think. And I think that's a good thing that's come out of this whole mess that we've been living through. But there'll be more to change next year.
I mean, there's no question in my mind that this last year, certainly I can speak for my own self, I really pivoted everything in this last year. I mean, I went from having a hugely successful 19 to 20. It was like, where'd you all go?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Weird, but everybody's kind of closing down the shops.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a moment for me to reposition everything that I'm doing and to develop new things. So, I created a whole lot of online programs. I wrote a new book and published it. I redefined the entire brand of Jacqueline Wales and everything that I have to offer. And a lot of other people did the same thing. And those who didn't are the ones who are sitting in that fear place right now going, well, I don't know what's going to happen to my future. Okay, so did you take action?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about it. Well, it doesn't get you anywhere just thinking about it. Yeah, take action. But the point being is that I think last year really gave people the opportunity, as we said earlier, to just figure out what's my priorities, what's really important to me, what do I want out of life. So right now the struggle is with hybrid teams. Right. There's a big subject right there because you've got remote workers, and people are showing up in the office, and they don't know how to handle it.
Right.
Because the people in the office think that the people at home, they're not working hard enough, because you can't see what they're doing.
Right. We have systems that you can manage.
Statistics said that productivity went way up when people were working at home. Because, right around where I live, which is San Francisco Bay Area, it could take you 2 hours to get to work. Yeah. 2 hours home.
The carbon emissions alone that you're not putting out. I mean, think of that. If you want to look at the green footprint. So, yeah, that's something. Well, Jacqueline, on that note, where can people find out more about you, your books, your website, information like that? Let's tell them where they can find you.
Well, thank you. So you can go to my website at JacquelineWales.com. And I'm going to spell that out because a lot of people can't spell my name. JacquelineWales.com. And there's a bunch of resources on there. And as a special gift to your audience, Bob, what I would like to do is if you go to my courses page and you look for the course that says Reigniting Your Career for Success, and you use the coupon code of JW21, you can get access to that program for free. And it's a value of $147. So it's yours for free with the coupon code JW21, Reigniting Your Career for Success.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for that. That's great. I would definitely be putting all this in the show notes. So, we'll have that out there. I really appreciate your time today, Jacqueline, so that, people, if you got questions, check out her website, check out her information. Don't forget to check out the book. I'm assuming it's on Amazon and all the different locations.
All the books are on Amazon. So, plug in the name, they'll come up.
Great.
Also, good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering Podcast, Jacqueline. I really appreciate your insight and the ideas of overcoming the fear. It's such an honor to be able to work with you and others that do these type of things. I think we need it in our world. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Bob.
All right. Take care.